All right, Casey, it's kind of slowed down now. I'll continue to let people in, but why don't we get started?
Okay, thanks, Wendy. Hi, everybody. My name is Casey Henry, and I am one of the regional leaders for Together Women Rise. I am in the South Central region, which is Texas and Oklahoma. I've been a member of Dining for Women, now Together Women Rise, for about 4.5 years. And it's been a really great experience with this organization. Really glad to see so many of you here tonight. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first event with Together Women Rise, I'd like to share with you a little bit about our organization. Together Women Rise is a powerful community of women and allies dedicated to achieving global gender equality. We have hundreds of local chapters across the country where members learn about gender equality issues, give grants to organizations that empower women and girls in low-income countries, and build community to forge meaningful connections with each other and with women and girls around the world. This is our monthly national webinar that's open to anyone who cares about and wants to learn more about global gender equality. So before we dive into talking about our grantees, I'm just going to go over some basic Zoom instructions. If you haven't yet muted yourself, please do so. It's the little microphone in the bottom left corner. Just make sure you're on mute before we get started. If you haven't already introduced yourself, please do so in the chat and say hi to the other people that are on this call with us. And finally, if you would like to change the view that's in the upper right corner, you can put it on either speaker view or you can put it on gallery view so you can see everybody's faces. And now moving on to introduce our first grantee. The November featured grantee is Sansar Maya, and this month we're supporting a project in Nepal that will provide women with the education and support that they need to transform their lives and build pathways out of poverty. Illiteracy traps Nepali women in an endless cycle of dependence on their husbands and family members, and it limits their life expectancy and leads to intergenerational poverty. It hinders access to medical care and other services, and increases the likelihood of domestic abuse, substance abuse, chronic stress, and mental health issues. Our November featured project with Sansar Maya will teach women conversational and written English, Nepali, mathematics, and life skills. And first, we're going to share a short video about Sansar Maya, and then I will introduce our guest speaker.
There's a quote that says, "Talent is universal, opportunity is not." For those trapped by extreme poverty, this quote is all too true. At Sansar Maya, our mission is to create holistic, community-centered programs that provide the opportunities, education, and support that women and children living in extreme poverty can use to build their own pathways out of poverty. Nepal is one of the world's poorest countries. Following years of political and civil unrest, nearly 60% of the population lives on less than $2 a day, approximately 17 million people. The combination of widespread poverty, high illiteracy rates, and unplanned pregnancies has led to increasing numbers of women and children living in extreme poverty. Through our Summa Women's Literacy Program, we serve women of all ages, with the average age of students being between 30 to 60 years old. In both locations, the women we serve received little or no formal education in their childhood. Only a handful of the women in our program are working within the formal economy. Most rely on their husbands, families, or broader community for support. None of the women have access to regular health checkups outside of those offered by our programs. Young women in Nepal are at risk of being forced to work in the drug trade, being sold as an indentured servant, or into the commercial sex trade. Additionally, more than half of the women in Nepal are illiterate. They lack equal access to education and, as a result, have few economic opportunities. Nepali women find themselves reliant on others to sustain them and their families, and in the communities where Sansar Maya works, they are often victims of domestic abuse with no clear path to improve their situation. COVID-19 confined women to their homes, resulting in an uptick in domestic violence. Experts say the impact of the pandemic will be felt for decades to come. Countless studies have demonstrated the benefits of educating women and girls in Nepal and around the world. Access to literacy programs improve women's income earning potential, political participation, community involvement, and reproductive and overall health, and leads to an increase in self-esteem and confidence and better outcomes for their children. The primary goal of our women's literacy program is to help women in our communities develop self-sufficiency. By building our students' literacy and numeracy skills in Nepali, they are able to more easily manage daily tasks, such as shopping and paying bills, and participate more fully in their communities. This is even more meaningful for many of our women who speak the regional language but cannot speak the national language of Nepali, and thus struggle to navigate independently outside of their community.
नमस्ते, म शान्ता लामा, म सेक्सन ए मा पढ्छु। म चाहिँ साथीको मार्फतबाट संसारै माया स्कुलमा पढ्छु र स्कुलमा पढेको अहिले 2 वर्ष भयो र अहिले मलाई लाग्छ हामीले महिलाले पनि पढेर केही गर्न सक्दो रहेछ भन्ने लागिरहेछ र त्यसै कारणले अहिले केही जान्ने बुझ्ने भएर सानोतिनो पसल थापेर बसेको छु र
नमस्कार, म सुन्दरी तामाङ हो। म संसार मायामा पढ्छु। म संसार मायामा पढेदेखि ममा धेरै फरक आइरहेछ। म पहिला कोहीसँग बोल्न सक्ने थिएन, हाँस्न सक्ने थिएन, यताउता हिँड्नु कहीँ यताउता हिँड्नु डर लाग्थ्यो। अहिले म जता पनि हिँड्न सक्छु, बोल्न सक्छु, अलि साथीभाइहरूसँग यताउता अरू फाल्टो मान्छेहरूसँग। पहिला कोहीसँग पनि बोल्न सक्ने थिएन, आफ्नै घर फ्यामिलीहरूसँग बोल्न सक्ने थिएन। अहिले त्यति डर लाग्दैन मलाई, म जता पनि हिँड्न सक्छु, एक्लै घुमेर हिँडेर आउन सक्छु जस्तो लाग्छ। इङ्ग्लिसबाट नाम लेख्नु सक्छ। मलाई खुसी छ संसार मायामा पढेर। धन्यवाद।
Additionally, we provide our students with biannual medical checkups and health-related counseling. Hospital visits can be costly, and many women in our programs do not have access to medical care outside of Summa programs.
नमस्कार, मेरो नाम साबिर श्रेष्ठ हो। म संसार मायामा ग्रुप सीमा पढ्छु। संसार माया पढेर पहिला शिविर आउँदाखेरि स्वास्थ्य जाँच गर्यो। पहिला बिरामी हुँदा पनि वास्तै गरिन्थ्यो। अहिले बेला जाँच्नुपर्छ भनेर थाहा भयो। अहिले परिवारको पनि हेरविचार गर्नुपर्छ भनेर थाहा भयो। संसार मायालाई धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद। थ्याङ्क यू।
The Summa Women's Councils build leadership skills in members while strengthening the connection between Sunsar Maya and the communities we serve. The councils, which are supported by Sunsar Maya staff, meet monthly. They are tasked with identifying community-wide challenges and needs specific to women and girls in their communities and finding creative solutions to meet those needs. It is thanks to our global community of supporters and the incredible network of Together Women Rise that we are able to do this work and continue to educate more women so that they can create their own pathway out of poverty.
And now I'm excited to introduce our speaker from Sansar Maya. Jahan Sarafi is the co-founder and executive director of Sansar Maya. She is a nonprofit professional with extensive program and project manager experience with a focus on international development and human rights. As co-founder and executive director, she works to create holistic programs that enable disadvantaged women and children in Nepal to build their own pathways out of poverty. Jahan has served various organizations committed to international aid, human rights, and fighting human trafficking. Most recently, she served as the program and development manager for the human rights organization United for Iran, built an international network that provided educational and medical relief to underdeveloped areas as the program director for Volunteer Nepal, and sat as the advocacy officer of the Advocacy Committee of California Committee North of Human Rights Watch. Jahan, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Casey. Hi, everyone. First, I just want to say hello and thank you. To be completely honest, I am always a little nervous about speaking, but having the opportunity to actually talk to you all and really just say thank you and share our gratitude for your support makes my fear of speaking a little bit better this time around. I thought I'd just give a little bit more of a background and context of Sansar Maya and our work, just to kind of give you all a little more sense of what we do there. So Sansar Maya means world of love in Nepali, and it began about 10 years ago. Myself and 3 others were living and working in Nepal, and I think, like probably so many people who visit, fell in love with the place and the country and just wanted to find a way to give back. And so we started really small, just with scholarships to children living in orphanages, making sure they had books and backpacks and just whatever they needed to go to school. And then over time, we tried to take a step back and thought, how could we have a deeper, more meaningful impact? And so this is when the idea of Summa After School was born. So Summa After School was a first of its kind program in the entire country. For those that aren't familiar, the school system in Nepal, for those who even do have access to it, is really focused on rote learning and memorization. There's not really an opportunity for other kinds of learning. And so what we try to do is teach students how to think, not what to think. And we focus on STEAM-based learning, which really enhances their critical and creative thinking skills so that over time they, despite kind of whatever educational opportunities they have, they're able to have those foundational skills to build their pathways out of poverty. A key part of that program and really all of our programs is really our holistic approach. So for our after school students, not only are they getting the academic support, but they're also getting twice annual medical and dental care, daily nutritious meals, and weekly mental health therapy. And so our women's literacy program, which RISE is so generously supporting, really organically grew from here. It was created because we know that when you lift up women through education and opportunities, she has better outcomes for herself and her children and her family, and educated women lift up the entire community. And our literacy program is also really unique, like our after school program, in its holistic approach, but also how we approach learning. So all of our teaching is really through real world tangible skills. And so we want our students to be able to take that and go directly out into their everyday lives. And a lot of what our students have reported back is that's exactly what's happening. So, you know, one of our students shared that she's now able to read the directions on her prescription bottle, and she knows she's taking her medication properly. And another one who previously couldn't go to a government office or medical office by herself says that she can now go because she could read the signs and she knows which rooms to go to. A lot of our students, especially over the last year, as we've had to move to digital learning, say that they can now communicate with family members abroad when they couldn't before because they have access to the messaging apps and they can talk to their families who are living and working abroad. And I think kind of some of the biggest stories that come out is we've had a few students who had come to us who were not able to read or write or do simple math, and they've now opened up their own small businesses. So these are all just kind of examples of, you know, things that I think all of us probably take for granted in our everyday lives, but is really so essential to quality of life. And so our goal with our women's literacy program is to give women the skills and support she needs to do whatever it is that she wants to achieve. I think I probably also need to share, kind of based on where we are in the world right now, that unfortunately part of our programs include emergency relief. That began in 2015 following, I don't know if you remember the devastating earthquakes that had happened in Nepal. And just as the country was starting to rebuild, the pandemic struck. Most of our families in our communities are day laborers. And so what that means is when Nepal went into a nationwide lockdown, they did not have savings even for a week to survive. And so we very quickly had to move to food distribution, which is still continuing to this day. We also moved our literacy and after school programs to an online virtual learning. We made sure that that holistic support that we really focus on continues. So our teachers are doing weekly check-ins. Our mental health therapist is doing weekly phone therapy. Our literacy classes are on a digital platform daily now. And a lot of our students actually have told us how much they appreciate because they're now actually learning more about technology that they hadn't before. So this is kind of like a broad stroke of our programs, but really our goal is that they really all work synergistically together and holistically to provide the care and support to our students so that they're able to, again, kind of achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve in their lives. I also want to share to this group, and something that's really important to us is that we are 99.9% a female organization, from our staff on the ground in Nepal to our board of directors all the way across. And also very important to us is that we're very much a Nepali-led organization. So what that means is we look to our team on the ground to identify the needs in the community and for our students and build the programs based on those needs. And our job here in the States is really to support their work and support whatever it is that they need. And then a quick little update about where we are. So I know I shared that over the last year and a half, we have been doing all virtual and at-home learning for all of our programs. In a little under 2 weeks, for the first time, we are going to be opening up our doors and finally reopening and bringing our students back in person, which we're so excited to do. And the other thing that I wanted to share with you is very much in large part to the support of all of you and Together Women Rise. Next year, in the second half of the year, we will be opening up our third location in the rural village of Machigan. This is an agricultural village in the northern part of Kathmandu. And this will house an after-school and women's literacy program there as well. And so this is going to allow us to double our reach in terms of the number of students that we're able to serve in Nepal. So, this is something that we've been working towards for the last couple of years, and to be able to do this at a time kind of coming out of this pandemic. Again, I just want to convey my gratitude to all of you for your support of our programs.
Thank you so much. We do already have a few questions, and I encourage everyone to put other questions in the chat. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more where the communities are where you are working. Are they in and around Kathmandu, or are they, farther away in the more remote areas?
Yeah, we have, so our two current locations, well, all three will be in the Kathmandu Valley. The current two, one is in the northern, again, kind of in the northern part of the valley. And that community we started there because our focus on the orphanages there. And it's very much kind of a working community. It's called Jorpati. And then our second community is in the southern part of the valley, and it's in an area called Mahalakshmi. And that community, in some ways, even though we kind of started with this community of need with a high number of orphans, Machigan in many ways is actually even more in need. That community is almost made up entirely of people who are living and working in brick factories and rug factories, which in Nepal often translates to slave labor, and families are living in slum tenements. And so that's why we had chosen that location. And then the third that I mentioned in Machigan is a kind of much more of a traditional Nepali rural village. So they don't have access to resources because of the distance and the ability to access resources that are closer to the main city of Kathmandu.
So this is a question that comes up quite often. Do the women have smartphones and internet access to be able to participate in the digital instruction? And how do they get those things if they're in these rural communities?
Yeah, it's something that has over the last couple of years definitely increased. At this point, most of the women have access to smartphones, whether it's somebody in their family, somebody in their community. We have found that is something that's becoming much more accessible, thankfully, because it does open up so much more opportunities for the women.
And reliable internet access?
Because we are still located in the Kathmandu Valley, yes. Once you get out to much further to the rural villages, you're relying more on satellite and things like that.
Right. All right. We also have a question about what are the biggest challenges that you've faced to keep your programs moving forward? And second part of that is, how do the men and other family members of the women accept your programs?
That is a great question. And actually, as soon as you asked the second part, I was going to answer the first part with the second part. For our women's literacy program in particular, that was probably the biggest challenge to starting it, was the opposition of men in their families, whether it was husbands, father-in-laws, even sons, that they often kind of stepped in and were like, why are you doing this? What is the need for, you have your role is at home or whatever it is. And so we found that, that our literacy program started in 2017. So now there's been several years, and now starting to see the outcomes and the benefits. So the women who stepped up and said, I'm still going to go, they now, their families are seeing the benefits of that for the entire family. And so we're seeing less and less opposition. And And hopefully over time, as more women join, the kind of community sees the benefit of the programs as well.
Would you mind sharing a little bit more about your personal story? You touched on at the beginning about how you traveled to Nepal and you saw a need there. You traveled with your friends. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? You know, when and why you went, where you went, and what you saw, and what really inspired you? Because not everybody that takes a trip ends up starting a nonprofit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I went, in my previous life, I was an editor. I was working in travel book publishing, which at the time was my dream job, and absolutely loved it. And the recession hit and people were not buying books and not traveling. And so our entire team was pretty much laid off. I took a job in e-commerce to kind of bridge the gap. And about 6 months in, I said to my now husband, I can't do this anymore. And so I left after my 6-month contract was up. I said, you know, this is something I've always wanted to do. I've always felt drawn there. I've always wanted to go. What do you think if I just go? And he said, yeah, sure. Like, let's, you know, this is your time. Go for it. It makes sense. So we got married in September of 2010, and I left January of 2011. And I was supposed to go for 6 weeks, and a couple weeks in, I was offered a job and called him up and said, can I stay for a year? And he said no. I said, are you sure? And then he finally said yes. And yeah, when people ask kind of what was it, I have to believe that it was serendipity, because that, you know, that time and that job, leaving what I thought was my dream job to turn into my life dream, living and working there. And it just felt like it was kind of all meant to be. And I was working with an organization that was doing work for underprivileged populations. And so kind of having that firsthand look at it and just feeling the need to give back. You know, I think also starting a nonprofit, it was very idealistic. It was like, we're going to do this. And then you get into kind of the nitty gritty of it. But over the last 10 years, we've learned a lot and are really happy about what we're doing and excited. And, you know, again, grateful for the support, because it's definitely a community effort.
That's awesome. I love hearing people's stories of how they came to it. We have someone that would like to know a little bit more about what you're actually teaching in the literacy classes. Are you teaching Nepali, English, other languages? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, a lot of our women in our current communities don't speak Nepali. There's over 100 languages in Nepal. And so you can imagine how hard it would be to not be able to even navigate kind of the national language. And so we do dual Nepali and English because, again, kind of access to so many things are done in English. And so we're teaching that, and then also basic math skills. And again, kind of all of this is done in a way that's very applicable, right? So, you know, using your mobile to calculate taxes or discounts. So a woman goes out shopping, she's able to like calculate out things and not be taken for granted, but so the shopkeeper, it can remain honest. You know, we're teaching them, how do you fill out forms if you need to fill out forms, like those kinds of things, is kind of how we approach the daily. And the other part of our program that's very different is so many literacy programs very much focus on kind of that book learning. So we do just very much like our after school program, it's a lot of hands-on. And I think you saw in the video about, you know, manipulating letters and numbers and learning in that way, because we found how much more impactful that is in learning and retention.
Awesome. You mentioned that a couple of the women had gone on to open their own small businesses. What kind of businesses did they open?
Mostly small shops, small community shops. So in our communities, shopping is still, you know, you go here for the vegetables and here for kind of your toiletries and things like that. And so the women have opened up kind of essential good businesses in their communities. And then a lot of, we've had a few others who have shared that, you know, if their family had a shop, one of the women had shared that she had not been able to ever help because she couldn't read what the items were or do math and do the transactions. And so now she's working there as part of the family business.
One of the things I've loved hearing about in these women's literacy programs we've supported is the impact it has on the woman's children, especially the girls, that they see their mother being educated and learning about these things. Have you seen that as well?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, what I love is, we get photos and you can see, I can't remember if it's in this particular video, but some of our women sitting with their children learning, and learning together, which I think provides kind of not only this sense of the importance of education, but doing it in a way that's also bringing them together. And I think that's something that's really been most impactful to see. Yeah, I think that would be.
I know the photos of a mom and a daughter doing their homework together is really quite great.
Yeah. One other thing I'll touch on that is we didn't mention in the video, but as part of our medical care, so our women's councils, which we mentioned, so these are small groups of women that come together and really are becoming leaders in their community and going out and seeing what the needs are. And so one of the things that they've identified as one of the biggest needs in the community is prenatal care. So you can imagine that if most of these women have never even had a well woman exam, she's also not getting regular prenatal care. So we're going to be integrating that into our program in the coming year. And this will be community wide. So not just for our students, but for any women in our community. And so not only is it going to provide immediate health care for a woman and her unborn child, but we also know that probably a lot of those children will be joining our after school program in the coming years. And so it really does kind of become, again, this holistic, full circle supportive care in our communities.
Right. I'm sure you must be a very visible presence in the communities, and everyone's kind of flocking to as you expand programs and get more and more involved in different aspects of families' lives. It's great. Well, we used to be called Dining for Women, and eating together, sharing food is still a pretty big part. So I see a chat is starting about people's favorite Nepalese food. Do you have a particular favorite that you'd like to share with us as we close out the session?
I do. I mean, I think everybody would probably say momos because that's the best. But I love dal bhat through and through. And for those that don't know, so dal is lentils, and it's just a mixture of like lentils and vegetables. And in most Nepali homes, especially kind of in the rural villages, it is breakfast, lunch, and dinner sometimes, but at least 2 meals a day, which was my meals while I was there. And eating the same thing twice a day never got old because it's so delicious.
Well, I should have mentioned this last night when we were also talking about Nepal, but I'll mention it tonight. We do have a Together Women Rise trip going to Nepal. It has been rescheduled several times due to COVID. We're hopeful that it will go next fall, next October. It is almost full. There were a few people that had to cancel during the pandemic. There are a couple of spots open, and if anyone feels very inspired from hearing more about this country, please check that out on our website on the under Join Us and the travel page, and you'll get to see some of these great things. So thank you, Jahan. I'm going to pass it back to our moderator, Casey, to continue on with the program.
Thank you, Wendy. And thank you again, Jahan, for being with us tonight. I am moving now to introduce our sustained grantee, which is the Bond Street Theater. This is the last year of our 3-year $75,000 sustained grant to Bond Street Theater. This project gives women and girls the tools and training to speak out for equal rights through theater, leadership, and advocacy training, and informational performances in their communities. And our own Vina, our Director of Grants and Partnerships for Together Women Rise, is going to give us an update on the Bond Street Theater and our sustained grantee project. So Vina, I'll turn it over to you now. Oh, and one more thing, if you have questions for Vina, there will be a Q&A, so put those in the chat, please. Thanks.
Wendy, will we watch the video after I speak?
Do you want to watch the video now, or?
Whatever. However you want to do it is fine.
We hadn't planned to watch the video, but I have it still up. We can show it first.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. All right, let's do that. See, I can be versatile.
Afghan women have made great progress since the days of Taliban rule, when women had no rights or freedom. Yet today, Afghan women still suffer severe social inequalities, which are especially pronounced in the Afghan judicial system. From the minute they're born, girls are raised to serve others. This is life for little girls, washing clothes, collecting fuel, tending sheep. Early marriage keeps girls from completing an education, leaving them with few opportunities. The life of a young woman is determined by others. The girls of Afghanistan have such potential. All girls have dreams. Rukia wants to be a pilot. Gulnaz, a women's rights lawyer. But the Afghan judicial system is also weighted against women and girls. Nearly 90% of all cases are tried in informal tribal courts, where women's rights are ignored. A woman may be imprisoned solely on the unproven testimony of a man. A woman's voice is counted only as half of her husband's. Most women here have been imprisoned for moral crimes, fleeing domestic violence or a forced marriage. Thanks to the members of Dining for Women, we were able to provide incarcerated women and their children creative, healing, motivational support. In 2010, we trained 4 all-women's theater troupes, a first in Afghanistan. They created shows about women's rights and performed in women's prisons across the country. Now they train other women and their children. Our methods of theater training give women a chance to regain self-esteem, tell their stories, heal old wounds, and take control over their own lives. Next, we continued this work with women and girls in Afghanistan, preparing them to fulfill their dreams. Our work has also taken us to Myanmar, where we've been working since 2009. Here we use theater as a tool to educate and inform. We traveled with a local theater troupe to Kumakaite, to jungle areas along the Thai border, with a show about the importance of hand washing for children in monastery schools and orphanages. For kids brought up in the jungle, this is an important lesson. Over the last decade, the country has been transitioning from strict military censorship towards freedom of speech. However, the new freedoms have unbottled old hatreds, and conflicts have erupted across the country. In addition to the well-documented violence against the Rohingya by the Burmese military, the Kachin State and Shan State see bands of insurgents fighting for independence from the military government. In warfare, women always suffer. Rape is a central strategy of war, as it means to demoralize, punish. Both the military and the insurgents are guilty. In 2014, we created educational performances that demonstrate the tragic costs of discrimination and the value of peaceful coexistence between ethnicities. For safety from censors, the characters in our play were frogs and lizards, but the analogy to actual factions was clear to the audience. After each show, the audience has a chance to role-play their solutions to the issues and discuss their ideas. This gives people a platform to visualize peace and cooperation, and women lead the way in this field. Our next project focuses on empowering girls, letting them know their rights and their power. Our theater training is a great tool for spreading information and also for training girls for leadership, practicing powerful body language, poise, vocal dynamics, and giving them the courage to speak out. As the Myanmar conflict continues to expand, Malaysia is becoming a migration destination. Not just refugees from Myanmar, but from 21 countries around the world. Thousands of refugees from Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Iraq, Sri Lanka, and elsewhere. However, Malaysia has not signed the UN Convention on Refugees, leaving the country's refugee population vulnerable to exploitation of all kinds, especially for women and their children. In 2017, we began working with Rohingya women refugees in Malaysia, partnering with the Rohingya Women's Development Network. We use theater as an engaging way to bring information on refugee rights and resources. Which schools accept refugee children? Where can refugees get health care? What can you do if you're detained? Our performances use no language, just physical enactment, so any language group could understand this valuable information. These shows reached thousands of refugees. Most important, we taught the Rohingya women and the Somali women how to turn their true life stories into plays. Now we have 2 new women-led theater groups who are spokespeople for refugee rights in their communities. Our next project in Malaysia tackles the effect of child marriage, a harmful custom that persists globally. Traffickers have become more and more bold as the number of refugees rises, and child brides have become a lucrative new business for traffickers. Information to protect girls and families is crucial, as well as empowering girls to make their own choices and speak out for justice and equality. We thank every member of Dining for Women for their dedication to women's rights and freedoms everywhere.
Thank you, Wendy. I think it's always wonderful to hear from our grantee partners when they visually tell their stories, especially one like Bond Street Theatre, where the whole art form of performance and communication without language necessarily is so very important. So the update from Bond Street Theatre, and the reason that they cannot be here today is the US team, which is actually Joanna and her husband, are actually flying to South Africa tonight, which is why they could not be here. The 3 programs that they had planned on were to do the sustained grant executed in 3 different countries: Afghanistan, Malaysia, and Myanmar. Now, if you remember, the first installment of the grant, they would have only received in December of 2019. And then March 2020, COVID hit. So they have been trying to pivot and trying to figure out how exactly to get their programs going as the lockdowns went on in all these different countries. So they have decided, and this was early this year, they have decided that returning to Afghanistan is no longer an option for them. They cannot have the programs in there. They have also decided, although they're kind of waiting to see if something's changed, that they cannot return to Myanmar. So what makes Bond Street Theatre so unique is that when they go into a country, they work with a local theatre troupe. And they work with the local theatre troupe to create the programming. And so once the theatre troupe is presenting the programming to the populations, right, it is always in the local theatre forms. It is always using very familiar forms of theatre, whether it is mime or acting or songs, dance, whatever it is. And Jahan has been telling us, Wendy has been talking about it. Most of these countries are multilingual. They have so many different languages. So these art forms can cross over so many different modalities and be more accessible to a larger population. So presently, Malaysia is still on target. Bond Street Theatre expects to go into Malaysia in October 2022 and do their programming. But for now, they are using the funding that was for Afghanistan and for Myanmar, and they are going to be doing a project in South Africa. So in South Africa, they are working with a local arts group called the Shade Art School and Theatre. And the title of the project is Rape Crisis Trust. They're going to be working with the Rape Crisis Trust in Cape Town. Most of you must have heard that South Africa has some of the highest numbers of GBV in the world. And especially this happens in the townships. So their programming is actually going to coincide in November with some UN initiatives that are also going on about gender-based violence. They are going to be working with young girls and with young boys. They are doing several workshops with the communities. The workshops cover about 120 and 150 participants. In the theater part of the project, which is still kind of going to start just as they get there in South Africa, they will try to communicate gender-based violence myths. They will try to emphasize the benefits of equal partnerships in communities, men and women, how to respect each other. They will try to emphasize new ways of social interactions. So it is something that they're extremely excited about. The communities in South Africa are very excited about Bond Street Theatre coming and working with them. And so we are waiting to hear how it all goes and how well they do, because as you know, Bond Street Theatre is a very creative group, and they always come up with something that's extremely creative and timely. And it kind of really works well with the communities, which is why we love them. So I'll stop there because that's the information we have as of now. I'm sorry, I'm a sorry substitute, and they are not here to tell their story themselves. But if you have any questions, go ahead. I would have to wear these to read your questions, if there are any.
I don't think there are any questions in the chat yet.
Okay.
If you have a question and you'd like to unmute yourself to ask it or put up your hand to ask it, that's fine too.
Did Bond Street say anything about their departure from Afghanistan and Myanmar? I mean, we know at the high level that, you know, it makes sense, but did they give any sort of personal stories about that exit? Can you share those with us?
Yes. So what they did say is that, you know, they all have theater groups that they work with in country. So they've always been waiting for feedback from them to figure out, okay, should we be returning or not? And as this year progressed and the Taliban took over, they said it was actually dangerous for foreigners to be in the country, especially women. And so since Bond Street Theatre works with women's groups, it was becoming, you know, you're drawing attention to a population that you would make them even more vulnerable. So they were told by their in-country partners, please don't come, not yet. So it would have been a waiting game, and I don't know if it's actually going to get any better. Myanmar too, it kind of seems to be going in the same way. And so the in-country partners are the ones who are telling Bond Street Theatre that this is not a good time. And so to honor our grant, you know, they decided that they needed to do something and move on.
Yeah, thank you.
Dina, there's a question in the chat about how these projects are coping with COVID. I know Jahan talked a bit about that. Do you have any information on what Bond Street Theatre has maybe had to cope with the pandemic?
So since they were not necessarily going in country, right? Because they only got their funding late 2019 and then 2020. So they did not have to necessarily deal with COVID on a personal level kind of thing, but their partners were in country. I don't know much about their partners in country and how they were coping with COVID. But generally speaking, I can speak about what all our grantees partners are doing.
That'd be great.
And what we are hearing consistently is all through 2020, nobody could go anywhere. There were lockdowns in countries that were way, way longer than ours. I know we got so tired so quickly, but there were very serious lockdowns in almost much of the global south, enforced, and so that created huge amounts of economic hardship. A lot of our grantee partners, what they were able to do in most of 2020, and they were pretty successful at doing it, was to fundraise for economic relief for all their beneficiary communities, is just to give them food and just to send the PPE and do all of that. So a lot of them had that, and they were, I mean, it is phenomenal to see how the world came together and how everybody worked and got the PPE and got the food and, you know, was able to do the best they could to keep their communities going. Now we are hearing more and more about lockdowns being lifted, and you can hear about people, just like we're hearing about people traveling now, you can hear people going back into the communities. And so I don't believe, because we haven't heard yet in terms of reports, that they have used our grant money necessarily for all the emergency care. They did fundraise and able to do that. So our grant money is still being used for projects, at least a significant amount of it is. So people are returning to the communities. Maybe there might be some adjustments in what exactly they wanted to do in terms of the project, because it is pointless to do something you desire for a community. It's easier to do something that the community needs. So I think we're waiting to hear all that. And as of now, we are hearing of wonderful stories. Let me leave you with one fabulous story from EduGirls. EduGirls was in Jaipur in Rajasthan. This was a group of girls who did not really have a school necessarily, and no school building. It belonged to another school. When those kids left, these kids went into the building and occupied the school. We had given them a grant where 30,000 of our grant was going to go for laptops for the school. And there was just a little bit of delay in purchasing the laptops and all of that. And then they decided, okay, this is not working. The educational software, we're not getting it on time, etc. It's not working. So they went with iPads. They went with iPads. They were able to buy more, give it to almost all the students in the school. And COVID hit. And this was the only school in Jaipur where the girls kept going. They kept studying online, and they were acing the exams compared to everybody else in the state. They were written about in the news. So there have been some beautiful, wonderful stories about making changes, pivoting, using our grant money, and really making lemonade out of the lemons they were faced with. So this was really what we're hearing, and we hope to hear some more.
All right. Thank you, Veena. I don't see any more questions at this point. Yeah.
Wendy, do you mind if I ask Veena, did she talk to the Nepali grantee that we just listened to about our other Nepali grantee that we love so much? I've forgotten the woman's name.
Blink Now?
Yeah, Blink Now. Thank you. Did you talk to either her about that? Does she know Blink Now or?
Jahan, I don't know. You probably heard of Blink Now. Maggie Doyle,
yeah.
CNN.
Yeah, Maggie's done incredible work. I think she was also here for a while during lockdowns, and I think has made her way back. I'm not quite sure.
She's just had a baby, so she's still here. Her second one.
Yeah.
So she's still in New Jersey, I believe, and hasn't yet returned. So,
yeah.
So yes, we do have several Nepal grantees in Nepal. I don't remember, Jahan, if I mentioned everything to you. So Elaine, no. But Jahan knows about some of them.
Thank you.
I will say, like the organizations who are doing similar work, it's actually really wonderful. I feel like it's like a really great community where, I think oftentimes you have organizations, and I hate to say it, but you're kind of vying for the same funds or things like that. But a lot of the ones that we have partnerships with and things like that, everybody's really there to do the work and to improve the community.
Mm-hmm. One day in the future, Jahan, we hope we can have a grantee portal on our website where all the grantees can get to know each other, maybe do a conference, where grantees can collaborate, and we have lots of dreams.
That'd be incredible. I love that idea.
So one day we will work towards that.
I'll volunteer as your beta tester.
Okay.
Well, and someone's already asking if a visit to Sansar Maya could be included in the Nepal trip. So we'll have to see about that. But I think time to head back over to you, Casey.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. So before we sign off for the night, we just have a couple of quick announcements. Our next national webinar will be Thursday, December 2nd at 8 p.m. Eastern. And in that meeting, we'll be discussing our featured project, which is Camara in Rwanda, and our sustained grantee project, which will be Blink Now in Nepal. And then be sure to check out our website for all of the information on our upcoming events. Click on the Join Us tab, and there you'll learn more, be able to register for the events, and also access recordings from previous events. And finally, one last note, we are currently in the midst of our annual appeal. The funds raised through our annual appeal are used to fund projects like the ones you learned about tonight, as well as all of RISE's learning and community building programs. If you could please make an annual appeal donation and invest in achieving global gender equality so that every woman and girl can live freely and reach her full potential. You can donate online by going to togetherwomenrise.org. And thank you again for joining us tonight. We hope to see you all in December.